I thought going into this, I knew what I wanted to do. You know, considering the year we've had, I definitely wouldn't have gone through without each and every single one of them. And that's what makes it even more difficult, is because every single one of them is special to me. Some I've had longer times and spent a lot more moments with, while others are a little bit more recent, but still feels as if we're meant to be. I don't want to hurt anyone. But how do you just pick 10? Good evening, Houseplants. Tonight, Christian will be making his final 10 picks for the year. This means 10 of you will receive a rose tonight, and 160 of you will not. Good luck. Here's Christian. Good evening, Houseplants. You all look very beautiful tonight. It's been an incredible year, spending all this time with each and every single one of you. You're all very precious to me, which makes this even more difficult to do. Probably the most difficult decision I ever had to make in my life. I don't know if I can do this. Can I see Monstera for a minute? Albo, can we just go here and talk? Hey guys, what's going on? Welcome back to my channel. So today we are doing our top 10 favorite houseplants of 2020. This isn't just another random 10 favorites of the month where I picked, plants I'm kind of feeling right now. I really did spend a lot of time thinking through each of my 160-ish plants or 170 and figuring out which of them are going to make this top 10 list. It was definitely a challenge and a very difficult decision to make, because even now I still think maybe that should have made it to the list, because there are a lot of good plants I am going to leave out of this top 10. And there was a lot of things I had to factor in to help me make this decision. Now, everything from the structure and makeup of the plant and how they look to, were they really good to me all year long? Some I've had obviously a little bit longer, while others are a little bit more recent, but nonetheless still have that special connection and relationship with them. So I think for the most part, that's what it came down to, is what connection did I have with this plant? Now, before we get started on my list, for those of you guys who's been following me for a while, I want you to pause this video, comment below, and tell me which of my plants made it in the top 10. And then after this video, I want you to reply back to that comment and see how many you got right or wrong. And for most of you guys who's watched my videos, I think you're gonna get a lot of these ones right. But without further ado, let's get this final 10 rose ceremony started. We'll start with the CISSUS DISCOLOR. So obviously it was a very difficult decision, but one of the reasons why I picked this to be number 10, it's because it's a great alternative to other trailing plants like a POTHOS or Synapsis, but it's so beautiful. I love the shape of this leaf, and just the pattern and color and texture of it really can rival against a lot of these like rare or uncommon plants, because it is a little bit uncommon, I find, but it doesn't have the same price tag as some of these rare house plants. So that is another reason why I love it, is because it is readily available, depending obviously where you're located. But if you do happen to come across this, definitely snatch one up, because it's so stunning. My goal with this right now is, because I do have it on my floating shelf, is to have it trail and cascade over that mirror, because I think it looked really stunning. The one thing to keep in mind with your CISSUS DISCOLOR is to make sure you do not allow the soil to dry out completely, because these will go crispy pretty fast and it is hard for them to bounce back. They're not as forgiving when it comes to underwatering, unlike a POTHOS or Synapsis, but relatively still easy to care for and also very easy to propagate. This is actually one of them that I propagated that I now transferred into sphagnum moss. So I did do a full care video and how to propagate about the CISSUS DISCOLOR, so definitely check that out. But again, beautiful plant. Check this out. So this is number 10. Coming in at number 9, it is the Philodendron Silver Sword. So this little guy right now, I know does not look much, but the reason why this one made it to my top 10, it's because, first of all, it's a beautiful plant. Especially if you like silver plants, this has such a nice stunning shade to it. But it is actually the plant that taught me about node cutting and propagation box. This was actually the first philodendron I had that started to die on me from overwatering, and the leaves started to drop, and I pretty much just tried to chop it off. I was only left with a piece of node. The mother plant, I actually threw it away, which I probably shouldn't have, because there were still roots there. I just didn't know what would happen to it. I thought it was dead. There was no leaves on it, but I took a piece of node, which is the only one left. I threw it in a propagation box, and then within weeks, I started to see some new growth. And then over time, it started to develop new leaves, and eventually it became into this little plant right now. So I did pot it back up to its own container, but for a while there, it was in a propagation box. This actually looks a little bit bigger than when I first got it back in April, but because of this philodendron sword, it actually gave me a lot more confidence to do node cutting and propagation, which is what gave me the confidence to cut up my philodendron melanochrysum and try to save that plant. So today I have a whole bunch of like philodendron melanochrysum cuttings that's starting to grow new leaves. And again, I wouldn't have been able to do that if it wasn't for this guy who actually pushed me to be able to say, hey, let me try and save this through node cutting and propagation, because I've never done that type of propagation before. So I definitely owe a lot to this plant, and that is a reason why he is number 9 on my top 10 favorite houseplants of 2020. So the next plant on our list is the Anthurium magnificum. So this guy is a beauty, and for those of you guys who's been following my stories on Instagram, you know when this first leaf showed up about a couple weeks ago, it was so tiny, and out of nowhere, it's just been growing so big every day. It's gonna definitely outgrow its previous leaf, which is this size, and this one's massive. It's got this beautiful inflow. I'm going to try to see if we can produce some seeds. I did take some pollen from my clarinarium, so we'll see that experiment. But similar to the philodendron silver sword, the one thing I like about anthuriums, and I think most of my anthuriums, is it really is teaching me a lot about sphagnum moss as a growing medium, because since I moved this to a pure sphagnum moss, it was an arid mix when I first got it. It started to just all of a sudden shoot out this inflow and this beautiful leaf, and it's so cool to see the plants react based on kind of the changes you make in its environment. And man, I love anthuriums, but this originally wasn't going to be in my top 10. I was going to have another anthurium, but because of this new leaf and how magnificent, no pun intended, this plant is, it honestly had to be in it. And man, they say that the anthuriums are like your crown jewels, or like the royalty of houseplants, and each of them has like its own, you know, you got the queen and you got the king. I think this is the other queen that's like, you know, the side queen of the king, if that makes sense. I'm just kidding, but it's a beautiful plant. I love the heart-shaped leaf, how close the nasal is together, and just that contrasting silver veins it's got going on. It's so beautiful. It's growing right now in sphagnum moss, and I do have this in the greenhouse, so it gets a lot of bright light and high humidity. And when it comes to watering my plants in sphagnum moss, I literally just water it like I normally would water any plant, allow that water to drain through, and then place it back. And I'll water it when kind of the sphagnum moss, the top 2 inches are starting to dry. It really depends on, you know, how big your pot is, but this is in, I think, an 8-inch container. No, 6.5 or 7. And yeah, it takes a while for it to dry because there is a lot of sphagnum moss here, but nonetheless, it's beautiful. It's thriving, and yeah, I'm so happy to have this in my collection. So the next plant to receive a rose is the CEBU pothos. So first of all, pothos, you guys know I love. They're easy to care for, they're easy to propagate, but the CEBU is so cool and so stunning. It has this nice blue silver tones to its leaf, a little bit more elongated, and has that cool, you know, very minimal veins, but you can still see it really close up. So really, really stunning plant. But the reason why this made it to my top 10 favorite of 2020 is because it's one of the few plants I have that I got off a trade from my friend Natasha, and I first got this as just a single vine that had really good roots, but since then I've cut it to about like 4 different vines now. It's got this main one that's climbing right now, and I'm trying to get the rest to kind of trail, so it's so beautiful. And yeah, I love this plant, and I don't know why this plant is so expensive and so hard to find, because it is literally one of the fastest growing plants I have, and that's why I think it makes it so easy to cut and propagate this. So hopefully in the new year, we're gonna see this a little bit more commonly available. You know, that's a somewhat reasonable price. How I care for the CEBU is very similar to all my pothos. I provide a lot of bright indirect light, warm temperatures, and make sure that I allow that soil to dry between waterings. When it comes to propagation, again, very similar. You pretty much just take a little vine, expose that aerial root, pop it in water, keep it in a warm area, bright light, and soon enough, it's gonna grow a lot of roots, and it really does develop a pretty healthy root system pretty quickly. Very easy to care for, very easy to propagate and share with your friends. So excited to have this in my collection. Coming in at number 6, it is the PHYLLANTHUS mirabilis, also known as the dragon wing. So this is probably going to be the most unique plant I have in my collection right now. It's one of those plants that has this caudex base, and it's so cool to have like half of it planted in soil and the other half sticking out. But I got this over the summer and it sprouted pretty quickly for me. It gave me a whole bunch of leaves, and then I overwatered it accidentally, and then all of a sudden those leaves dropped. But where those leaves were, it created more of that structure and that caudex base that eventually sprouted new leaves, so it just kept growing. And now I have this one right now, and considering we're in the middle of winter, it's still doing really well for me. And what makes this plant so unique, aside from the obvious look of it, is the leaves fold in at night and they open up during the day. So it really does remind you of a dragon flapping its wings. It's so cool and so unique, and definitely one of my favorite houseplants right now. How I care for this is quite simple. I do have it near my south-facing window, about like 5 feet away. When I first got this, I planted it in a very airy medium mix, so pretty much half perlite, half cacti soil, and maybe a pinch of peat moss. But then I would mist it every morning to try and create humidity, and eventually started to shoot out some growth, and it woke up, and then from there it just kept going. I don't water this often because obviously it's a caudex space, so it's going to store a bit of water here. I say right now I probably water this like once a month, and very little watering because we are in the middle of winter. But nonetheless, beautiful. It's done well for me, so I'm happy to have this in my collection. So the next one on our top 10 favorite houseplants of 2020 is the neon pothos. There was no way I was gonna leave this out of my top 10 favorite houseplants of 2020. It's so beautiful. It's so stunning. I love the different shades of neon it's giving me right now, and it's just so long. And again, it's a pothos, so they're very easy to care for. But I do believe that everyone should have a pothos, regardless of whether you're a plant expert or a newbie. They're really fun and easy to care for and easy to propagate. And the neon one is definitely one of my favorite houseplants. It's actually one of those houseplants that I do not want like a variegated version of it, because I think just a solid neon green and the different shades of neon green it gives you is beautiful enough. And it's just been so good to me. I do have it here on top of my bookshelf, so it does get a lot of bright, indirect, south-facing light. Maybe it's about like 4.5 feet away from my window. And I allow the soil to dry between waterings, and I did recently just cut this to help propagate my jade satin syndapsis. So whenever I cut this one, it just continues to shoot out new vines, so it's so good to me, and that's the reason why he is definitely in my top 10 favorite houseplants of 2020. So we're getting close to our final 3, but coming in at number 4, it is the Alocasia dragon scale. So this is a beautiful Alocasia, and it's become one of my favorite houseplants right now. I love alocasias because I do find them really easy to care for. They can grow massive, almost into like a tree-shaped form, and the dragon scale is just so beautiful because of the texture and pattern and color of its leaf, and just the shape of it. It really does look like a scale of a dragon with those deep blue veins and just that texture it gives you. It's just so cool. I can't get over how beautiful this plant is. It is obviously a little bit more on the uncommon side and a bit more expensive, but so hopefully come next year these guys will become a little bit more available. But nonetheless, they are beautiful. And when it comes to my alocasias, what I actually realized or learned lately is, in order to get these like huge leaves, you got to make sure that first of all, you got to keep an eye on the watering whenever a new leaf is starting to show up, because you do not want this to dry out completely when a new leaf is starting to grow and unfurl. The other thing too I gotta make sure is it has enough room to grow. This was originally in a 4-inch container, and this newest leaf that you guys see there, it's quite small compared to its previous one, and that's because it was in a 4-inch container and it probably needed a bit more room. So I did recently move this up to a 6-inch container. Since I did that, there is a new growth that's happening, so I'm hoping it's going to be a bigger leaf because now it has more room. I do have them in the greenhouse right now. This one's in the greenhouse. The silver dragon's not in the greenhouse. For the most part, they don't need necessarily high humidity that the greenhouse provides, because I've had other alocasias like the silver dragon outside the greenhouse and they do fine. I think what's definitely more important for these guys is a lot of that bright indirect light. And I got to make sure that I don't allow that soil to dry out completely between watering, especially when there's a new leaf that's starting to show up. But yes, this came in at number 4. So we are now down to our final 3 rows of the night. Coming in at number 3, it is the Anthurium forgetii. I mean, come on, look how beautiful this Anthurium is. And I've been saying this for a while now. I think the forgetii out of all my Anthuriums is my favorite one. And the reason why it's my favorite is because it's a little bit different and unique to the rest of the Anthurium. But it's like upside down raindrop shape here. And you guys can see it doesn't have like a deep nasal like the rest of the Anthuriums do. Similar to maybe like a queen, which is why a queen is also a favorite of mine. It has more of that like oval shape, and the pattern on this, like the texture, it's a bit raised that you guys can see right there. And then it's so velvety, it's so cool against the sun, and then the veins are quite thin. but it still has that nice crystal. See, look at that. I mean, come on. So stunning, so beautiful. And most of my anthuriums I'm starting to really find really easy to care for. I do have most of my anthuriums in the greenhouse, and this is doing really well in there. I also do have this in pure sphagnum moss. I actually recently just moved it up a size because it was in a 3-inch container. So I'm hoping by moving it up a bit, it's gonna give me a bit more growth, because it was a little bit crowded when I looked at the roots. The roots were starting to circle up, so I was starting to get that root down look. Hopefully this gives me at least an inflow or another leaf, you know, as we head into the new year. But it's so cool. Look at it. Oh, I can't get over this anthurium. Honestly, one of my favorite anthuriums ever. So coming in at number 2, it is the, ta-da, the string of hearts. So there was no way I was gonna leave this plant out of my top 10 favorite houseplants of 2020. Even though I've had this plant for a few years now, it definitely is one of my favorite houseplants ever. It's just been so good to me since I first got it. It continues to grow, and I continue to cut. It continues to grow, and it's actually touching the ground right now, and I do want to trim it again because I don't like it when the ends get pretty tangled, which often it does when it starts touching the ground. But it's been so good to me, even though I almost did you know, kill this by underwatering it. I forgot about it because I was busy with other plants, but it did forgive me, and I'm so thankful for it. And yeah, it's a beautiful houseplant. And I know a lot of you guys ask the questions on how to care for this or how to propagate it. I've done a lot of videos on this plant because it is one of my favorite houseplants ever, so definitely check that out. But this came in at number 2, and the number 1 plant on my list. Also, both of these plants have special meanings. It was hard for me to choose which one was number 1 or number 2. So this could easily be my number 1 favorite plant. But the number 1 favorite plant of 2020 is the, ta-da, the Ficus elastica TINEKE. And of course, this had to be my number 1 plant. Again, it was very difficult between this or the string of hearts. But one of the reasons why I picked both of these guys as my top 2 favorite, even though I've had them for a while, is because they've just been good to me. They've been so good to me, and I really like them and I really love them, and they're both beautiful, and they obviously mean something very special to me because my coloring book does feature these guys on the cover, this one on the front cover and then the string of hearts on the back cover. And that was a very big project for me. It was also a very special one that I had to, you know, put a couple of my plants that truly did, I don't know, it's kind of cheesy to say, inspire me to continue to be a better plant parent. I don't know if that is cue sad music right now. I'm just kidding. First of all, the Ficus elastica, you guys know, is one of my favorite genus of plants ever. I find them really easy to care for, but they're so beautiful and so unique. And the TINEKE one is a beautiful one because if you guys like variegation, the variegation on this plant is one of the most beautiful ones you'll ever see. They literally look like watercolor art. Each leaf is uniquely different than the other, and it's just so beautiful. And I find these guys really easy to care for as long as you're able to provide them a lot of bright indirect light. Again, I have a south-facing window, so they love that. And you just gotta make sure that you allow that soil to dry between watering. A few questions I often get is about the browning on the leaves, even though you're allowing the soil to dry. You gotta make sure that the middle of this plant, because these plants tend to grow like really thick roots in the middle because they're so woody. So sometimes what will happen is it gets so tight in that middle, in that root ball, that when you are watering, water gets stuck there. So you gotta make sure it's not clogged in there, but that's one thing I had to kind of keep in mind when it comes to like watering this plant. Similar to the string of hearts, because it is one of my favorite plants. I've done a lot of videos on how to care and propagate your Ficus elastica, so definitely check that out. But yes, very, very beautiful. And these guys aren't necessarily rare or uncommon and very hard to find. They're somewhat reasonable price as well too. So if you do happen to come across one, you should definitely get yourself a Ficus elastica TINEKE because what can I say? Look how big it is. It's up to here now. So I'm about 5'7.5" during my best days and 5'7", but yeah, it's almost as tall as me, and I do expect it to be around my height come next summer because this is how much it's grown since I think over the summer. It gave this growth right here from here to this part. So that was the growth that took place this summer. And I can tell because usually the new growth has more of the green stem versus the older growth, which gets a little bit more kind of brown and woodier, more like a trunk style now. So very, very cool that it's gave me so much growth this past summer, and it's still growing. So there you guys have it. Those are my top 10 favorite houseplants of 2020. Again, very difficult decision to do because I'm standing here filming and I'm looking at my Hoyas, or they're looking at me, and they're wondering why none of them made it. So there were a couple close ones. A few of my other philodendrons, you know, they could have made it as well too, like the melanochrysum, because I went through a lot with that one. Monsteras, you know, there was no monstera in this list, but again, there was a couple that probably could have made it. So very difficult to do, but nonetheless, this was my pick of the year. Comment below and let me know if any of your projections was right. Were you surprised that some made it and some didn't? Other than that, hopefully you guys enjoyed this video, and we'll see you guys in the next one. Peace.